In my book on Obama, a book I actually started about a year ago, I was baffled a little bit by Obama. And in fact, I had a theory about Obama that turned out to be completely wrong. My initial theory about Obama was I was thinking that I was trying to understand why Obama was so intensely focused on expanding the role of the government. You know, Bill Clinton said only a decade ago the era of big government is over. And after the Cold War, it seemed kind of obvious that capitalism had defeated socialism, and the evidence of the last century is that the expanding state, after a point, tends to become very counterproductive. So I was trying to think, why is Obama doing this? Did he not live in the 20th century? Is he not familiar with all this evidence? North Korea versus South Korea, the fate of all kinds of programs. So what's going on with Obama? And my theory was, I think I understand this. Obama ultimately is a product of the civil rights movement. Obama is the first African-American president. He came of age in the 60s and 70s. He went to college in America, and so he learned the lessons of the civil rights movement, and the valuable lesson of the civil rights movement was that for African-Americans, the government was very necessary to secure basic rights. For immigrants, it was a different story, but if you were black growing up in the South, you needed the federal government to desegregate the schools. You needed the federal government as an employer to hire African Americans, and in fact, government hiring, the Great Society, was instrumental in creating the black middle class. So I said Obama has sort of taken that ideology, and in a way, very ingeniously, he has deracialized it. He has crossed out, if you will, the term black, and he's applying the big government solution, which did work for African Americans, to all of America. I thought, well, this is a very ingenious theory. No one has said it. Let me explore it. Let me explore specifically Obama's sort of racial identity. Interestingly then, as soon as I began to explore it, I began to realize that Obama's racial identity is not the issue at all. Obama occasionally does focus on it, but actually when he focuses on it, he's almost always misleading you. I just wrote an article a couple days ago in the San Francisco Chronicle, so I want to give you an example of what I mean when I say misleading you. Obama has a pivotal scene in his book, Dreams from My Father, where he's sitting in the US Embassy in Indonesia, and he says, I was just sitting there, and I picked up some issues of Life magazine. I was thumbing through them, and he goes, my blood began to boil. I began to shake. Electric currents began to go through me. Why? He says, because I saw an article about a black man, an African American, who was taking injections and medical treatments to lighten his skin. And he said, how horrible, how demented is this? How terrible must racism be in a society where people are driven to take medical treatments to change their skin color from black to white? And Obama says, right at that moment, as I was shaking, my white mom walked into the room, and he says, I hid my feelings. I put on a calm, serene face, the Obama face, and I never showed any emotion. Very pivotal scene in his book, Dreams from My Father. Well, when Obama was running for president, some reporters for the Chicago Tribune decided, well, let's go find that issue of Life magazine in which Obama found this horrific article. And so they went into the archives of Life magazine, and well, it turns out that no such article was ever published in Life magazine. So at a press conference, this was asked of Obama, and he said, well, you know, I maybe got it wrong. I think it was in Ebony. So a check was then run through all the archives of Ebony. No article exists there either. In fact, no one to date has ever been able to find such an article. My theory about Obama, which I won't develop at any great length, is that Obama, at root, his dreams come not from the American dream and not from Martin Luther King's dream. They are his father's dreams. Think about his book title, Dreams from My Father. Not dreams of my father. He's not saying I'm writing about my father's dreams. Dreams from my father means these are my dreams that I got from my dad. Now, Obama's father was an anti-colonialist who grew up in Kenya, came of age during Africa's great struggle for independence from the British. But of course, Obama never knew his father. His father he met only once when he was 10 years old. His exposure to his father was very limited. During his life, in his great quest for his father, Obama turned to other anti-colonial writers to feed him, if you will, the ideology that his father stood for. And by the way, my father too. I grew up in an anti-colonial atmosphere in India in the 1960s and 70s. And so I was thumbing through, I picked up a book off my shelf. It's by the great anti-colonial writer Frantz Fanon. It's called Black Skin, White Masks. Fanon was born in Martinique, but he was an Algerian freedom fighter. He was a psychiatrist. We know Obama read him because Obama cites him in Dreams from My Father. So I'm thumbing through the book Black Skin, White Masks, and I come across the most remarkable passage. Frantz Fanon is talking about West Indian and African blacks in the French colonies of North Africa, and he says these people really want to be white. They secretly want to be like their colonizers. And he says they want to be white, and they stand up and recite poems about our ancestors, the Gauls, which is, of course, the poems you learn in France. And their ancestors are not the Gauls. And then he says, things are so bad that I even know of a case of a black man in North Africa who has taken injections and medical treatments in order to whiten his skin. Fanon calls this denegrification. The point I'm trying to make is, this, I believe, I have discovered the source where Obama lifted, plagiarized, manufactured this racial incident that was then applied to himself. So whenever Obama is talking about race, very often he is, in a sense, you might say, concocting things. And obviously so, because in some ways you can say, what does it mean to be African American? It means to be descended from slaves. That is the meaning of being African American in America. But Obama's not descended from slaves. I don't just mean that he never sat at a segregated lunch counter. I mean that he's never had any ancestors who were slaves. His father was an immigrant who went to Harvard, and his mom was white. So the point I'm trying to make is something deeper, something different is going on here. I just want to say that the anti-colonial view, a view that I grew up with as a young boy in India, is a very powerful explanation of what the Obama White House is doing, both in foreign policy and in domestic policy. And I want to give you just a single example of that before opening the door to questions and discussion. I mentioned this morning, but I didn't explain, a very interesting case that recently surfaced. About a year ago, the government of Scotland decided to free a man who had been arrested, tried, and convicted of terrorism. This is Abdel al-Megrahi, the Lockerbie bomber. This is the guy who blew up Pan Am 270 over Lockerbie, Scotland. 270 people were killed, the vast majority of them American. Bassett was convicted, and then a medical doctor said, we think he only has a few weeks to live. He's terminally ill. We should let him go. And the Scottish government had proposed releasing him, and the Obama administration objected very loudly, and rightly so. Here's a man responsible directly for killing a lot of Americans. But then the London Times reported a few weeks ago that it had obtained a letter sent by Obama to the Scottish government in secret saying, we do not mind if you release this man. We just prefer that you keep him in Scotland rather than send him home to Libya. And Scottish officials are quoted in the article saying, when we saw that the Americans didn't care, we're like, let the guy go. And today, Megrahi, 1 year later, in perfectly good health, is walking around a free man in Libya. So now you have to ask, why would an American president, while publicly protesting something like this, in fact tacitly approve the release of a known terrorist directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans? Why would somebody do that? What theory for Obama explains that? He's a socialist? Why would socialists favor this? I think that the answer is more clearly discernible if you follow Megrahi's trial. If you follow Megrahi's trial, he says very clearly, he says, I am a soldier fighting against U.S. imperialism. The United States has currently invaded and occupied 2 countries, Iraq and Afghanistan. It is terrorizing. The American rogue elephant is stampeding and terrorizing the entire Muslim world. I am a resistor against US imperialism. Now, if Obama sees things that way, because his dad saw him that way, it would help to explain not why Obama wants to blow up the airline, of course not. But there's a sense that this guy is fighting against an evil in the world. What's the evil? The evil isn't Iran or Al-Qaeda. The evil is the rogue elephant, the United States, and all that it is doing in the world. So this would help to explain in a strange way why, while expanding the welfare state at home, Obama simultaneously is determined to get us out of Iraq, get us out of Afghanistan. In his Iraq speech, he said, I don't want victory. I don't even want to talk about victory. For me, victory is withdrawal. If I get out, that is success. And that is exactly what things are from the anti-colonial view. If you are illegally occupying other countries, the right thing to do is to go home. Stop doing that. All I've done this evening is offer a couple of thumbnail indications of some of the very striking and disturbing things that are happening, I believe, in the White House. In other words, we are in a great competitive struggle in the world. And I, like Obama, am an anti-colonialist. Colonialism was bad. But where our paths diverge is that I think the solution to colonialism is the very opposite of Obama's. It is the American idea of opportunity and liberty. And many poor countries, by the way, have found a better solution to colonialism, the legacy of colonialism. What is that solution? It's the solution described by the economist Thorstein Veblen many years ago. He called it the advantage of backwardness. What he meant is that if you're a poor country, you have a great asset, cheap labor. If you can figure out how to make stuff that other people want to buy, you can rapidly come up in the world by using the advantage of your cheap labor. And who's doing that right now? China, India, Obama's former country, Indonesia. These countries are coming up in the world by taking advantage of their backwardness, and they are growing at incredible rates, 6, 8, 12%, 4 or 5 times faster than the United States. So what worries me as an American is that we are on top of the world. We have been for half a century. But no country that ever goes from being a leader to dropping into second or third or fourth place historically has ever come back. Think about the Greeks, the Romans. Eventually the sun did set on the British Empire, and it's not likely to rise again. Britain will never, at least in the foreseeable future, recover its previous position. So here we are as Americans, we're in a competitive world. And my worry is that while we'll come out okay in the end, far from meeting the challenges of that world, in some ways I think Obama is pulling us off the road. He's taking us ultimately in a way that undermines American competitiveness and American leadership. So let me say in conclusion that what I'm trying to do in these debates ultimately is to recognize that in our society we are in a political and economic crisis, but this crisis deeper is an intellectual crisis and a moral and spiritual crisis. I think our challenge as Christians is not to embrace my answers, but to try to bring, if you will, a Christian perspective to bear, to apply it to the difficult problems in the world, both the problems affecting the church and affecting God and religion, but also the problems affecting economics and politics and history and media and academia. I think if we do that, we will fulfill the great biblical mandate, most certainly not to be of the world, but to be very much in it, making a difference.